Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night. It is your boy BD, and I am the host of the Horror Tavern. And today I got a review for a vintage horror paperback book, and I got inspired to do more vintage horror paperback reading and now future reviews because of one of my favorite horror book review YouTubers called Paperback Mania. Shout out to Leon. He's not uploaded videos in a few years now, but he does a bunch of reviews on like solely vintage horror paperback books, and I absolutely love his channel. I love the way that he does reviews, so shout out to Leon. And since he's not made videos in years, I decided, you know what, I want to check out some of the stuff that he reads. The plots always sound really crazy and cool. So I decided to, you know what, maybe start covering it. And vintage horror paperbacks, they can range from books that are extremely well known to some relative unknowns to sometimes if you score a complete unknown, you might be one of the few people in the world who have basically read that or have publicly stated that they've read that. So it's a wide range of variety you can get. And a lot of vintage horror paperbacks, they're from lesser known authors, people just trying some unique stuff. So that's what makes it interesting. And today I'm going to be doing a review for a 1995 Archway paperback book, a sci-fi horror book called Maniac by John Peel. Now, Maniac by John Peel, the title is a little bit strange. It doesn't, the Maniac title doesn't exactly allude to what you think it would be. If you read this book's title, you might think that it's a story about like a slasher or some type of true crime or some criminal thing. Maybe there's a lunatic running around and killing people. It's not exactly that. And I'm not quite sure what the title is alluring to, other than maybe they're just trying to come up with a catchy title to sell the book. But this is a sci-fi horror book, and it basically deals with dream horror. It deals with the idea of sleepwalking, maybe some Lovecraftian-ish forces are influencing a high school of kids and causing them to do some dangerous things, that their wildest fantasies start coming to life as they start basically sleepwalking and daydreaming and getting influenced, and it may or may not cost them their lives, their health, and potentially the integrity of their close relationships with others. So that's essentially what the plot is about. It's not a slasher story, it's more a sci-fi horror story. So as long as you know that going into it, let's talk about the plot, and then I'll give my thoughts about the book. This book is basically opens up with a kid named Jess. Jess is a high schooler guy who's basically in his bed, and he starts seeing this strange thing. He feels like he might be in like sleep paralysis or like REM sleep. He thinks that he might be, in a sleep phase, but he's kind of, bouncing back and forth outside of it and looking around his room. And as he looks up, he sees this, I think, and I read this book a little while ago, so I'm briefly remembering some of the stuff, but I think he sees this yellow swirling mist that has tendrils around it. And it looks like this mist is alive. It's pulsating, it's moving, it's glowing. These misty tendrils are sort of gently flowing down towards him in the bed. And he assumes, okay, I'm in sleep. This is a nightmare. This is a dream. I shouldn't take it seriously. This is probably some vivid dream that I'm having, even though it seems a little bit odd to him because he feels like he can feel the breeze that's moving. He feels like he can feel and sense some extra things going on in his environment that normally wouldn't really be there if you were sleeping. But he chalks it up, you know what, maybe it's just a very vivid dream. And next thing you know, you cut down to these tendrils, basically wrapping towards them, and then it cuts to the next day. And when it cuts to the next day, you get introduced to the main character, Dawn. She's a ginger-haired girl, pretty and pretty popular overall. She's got two friends who I think is named like Candace, and like nickname is like Candy or something. And I forgot the name of the other girl, but she's got two basically girlfriends that she's heading to school with. And you find out that I think her father is like a salesman, or he works in stocks or something, and the mother is a registered nurse. She works at the local, or registered doctor. She works at the local hospital in the town. And as they're heading to school, you get introduced to some slice of life stuff, her school experience, how she's doing in school, what are some of her interests. She has an interest in literature and stuff like that. You get introduced to some other figures, like a guy she has a crush on named Shane. Shane is this very sort of Chadley, charming guy who's into literature as well. He's more so into like weird books. He's into like weird fiction and stuff. or just stuff like that. And then he's got a strange friend who's very goofy, very nerdy, but he's like a conspiracy theorist. He believes in aliens and all this crazy stuff. And when they get to school and they start interacting with each other, next thing you know, the kid that you got introduced to in the beginning, Jess, basically ends up bumping against Dawn's shoulder and doesn't apologize, doesn't do anything. He just keeps walking forward. And Dawn and her friends are sort of weirded out by this because basically he just ran into her. He didn't apologize. And he seems zoned out or sick or like, tired or something. He looks like exhausted or sick or not himself because Jess is normally a very sort of kind guy. He's a very sort of stand-up guy, very nice, soft-spoken. So the fact that he basically just ran into the main girl and didn't say anything and is looking zoned out, at first she's extremely mad that he's acting this way, thinks he's a jerk. But then she realizes, you know what, maybe there's something wrong with him. So she decides, you know what, I'm not close friends with him, but I am acquaintances with him, and I know something is off. So let me go approach and see if he needs anything. And her friends, Candy and the other girl are sort of like, no, Dawn, leave it alone. Forget that guy. But she's like, no, I think something's wrong with him. Let me just go see if he's okay. And as she runs up, she tries following him. He starts weaving his way through students and getting up to like the top floor of the school. And she starts heading up the stairs. And she thinks that that's weird, the fact that he's going up to like the top, the toppest floor of the room. I think it's like the third floor or fourth floor of the school. She doesn't understand why he's going up there because of the fact that his first class is in the ground floor. It's in the first floor. So why is he even going up there to begin with? And as she follows him up the staircase and eventually she sees him walking down the hallway at this top floor where there's no other little students around, he goes all the way to the end where the window is. And she's weirded out. She's like, why is he just staring out the window at the top floor? And next thing you know, she sees him climb on top of the little, the little ledge of the window. And she thinks like, what the hell is he doing? Like, is he about to jump? Is something wrong with him? And she yells towards Jess like, yo, Jess, what are you doing? Snap out of it. Why are you climbing up there? And he basically turns around and looks at her with this like dreamy look in his eyes and goes, it's okay. I can fly. And he jumps out the window. He leaps. He just straight up says, it's okay. I can fly. And he straight goes out the window and splats across the concrete. Kids are screaming in shock down below. Dawn runs up to the window and sees this horrific sight where he's sprawled out. He's bent and contorted in all places. His bones are broken and he's bleeding. Just blood pools are just spreading across the pavement. And she realizes this dude just committed suicide casually. And it traumatizes her. She gets freaked out. And as the story continues and they don't really understand why he was this way, they're concerned about it. They're freaked out about it. Dawn swears that there was something wrong with him, that there might be something more going on. Like, it couldn't have just been that he was depressed or sad. He's a very nice, upstanding guy, and the fact that he had this dreamy look in his eyes, the fact that he was acting weirdly, she just has a strange feeling about it all, that maybe something overcame him. He wasn't himself. And as the story continues, she realizes that more and more people start getting affected. And soon, eventually, even some of her friends, like one of her friends, Candy, basically ends up walking out of the girls' locker room at one point, completely stark naked, just walking through the hallway as if she's some sort of runway model. And all the kids are basically shocked. The guys are making jokes, whistling, catcalling, but she's freaked out. And then her and Shane eventually grab Candy and try to shake her out of it. And when Candy gets brought to the mother's hospital and gets examined by her mother, who's a doctor, Candy's experience, because she's alive right now, and the experiences of some previous other victims, all that stuff basically ends up coming to the conclusion that these kids are in a weird trance as these events are unfolding, that all the victims so far that have been alive and dead have been in a dreamlike state, the same as sleepwalking, where they are vividly dreaming as they are walking. However, the problem with it is that as they scan their brains and check the brain waves and stuff, they realize that even though that they're lucid dreaming, even though that they're sleepwalking, they're not in that state that gets them rest. Like, they are not rested. They are basically alive, awake, moving, aware of their environment, but their mind is basically off in another place. So these kids are getting exhausted to death. And you got some people who, if they're not helped, they're going to just straight up drop dead out of exhaustion. And, you got other people who are just committing suicide, who are killing themselves, who are getting into dangerous situations. You got people getting run over by cars. You had a guy commit suicide. There's a lot of crazy shit going on with these high schoolers basically seeming like they're being infected by something that's making them lucid dream, dream walk, and essentially lose their minds. And that's sort of alluding to the title of the book, Maniac, where you're driven into the point of lunacy. Like, you're become lunatic, you become crazy. People don't know how to help you, and that's why Dawn and her friends are trying to realize how they can stop this before more of their friends and acquaintances are affected, and who knows, before they themselves might be affected. And as the story continues, they do some research and find out that, yeah, there might be much more going on than meets the eye. And this threat that may be looming around the school has existed for longer than humans can imagine. And that's where I'm going to leave the story at. Again, it's a sci-fi horror story. You got some strange forces at hand. You got some crazy stuff going on. Some of the positives that I love about it is that the book can get really dark at points. Like I mentioned, the opening scene was very ominous with this guy, Jess, basically being in his room and seeing all these strange things. And then eventually the next day in school, he just commits suicide. And just that line that he delivers so nonchalantly, where he's like, "Oh, it's okay. I can fly." And he just leaps out the window, collapses, and just gets crushed and died. That was insane. Just, it's such a creepy and eerie moment. Seeing all these acquaintances and friends basically start losing their minds and start sleepwalking and lucid dreaming is creepy, because I am very scared of the idea of sleepwalking. I've never had sleepwalking. I've never had, sleep paralysis. Knock on wood, I hope I don't get it. But it's a very scary thing, sleepwalking, because you're not in control of your body. Like, you are literally doing stuff, thinking you're in a dreamlike state. You could potentially be hurting yourself. You could be hurting other people. You could waste so much time. There's a lot of problems that come with sleepwalking. And the idea that this sleepwalking is being weaponized into some bad shit is pretty crazy. And to think that there might be some otherworldly forces that are involved in utilizing that is insane. The idea of people getting infected, just like a virus, just like, how zombie viruses continue going from host to host. That's scary, because you realize that if you're in this high school or you're in this town, you are basically susceptible to being mind washed or turned into this sleepwalking, dreamless figure that could potentially hurt other people you love, or just potentially end up hurting yourself. And again, even if you don't hurt yourself, the fact that the doctors are scanning people's brains and realizing that they are sleepwalking in a dream state, but they're not getting any rest because all their other bodily functions are awake and aware of the environment, you will basically drop dead of exhaustion. So there is very little that the characters in this book can do. The fact that they have to suffer with their friends dying, they have to suffer through their friends basically going down one by one and figuring out, how can we protect this? Nobody in the school is going to believe us. Obviously, they don't try that shit where people are going to believe them. The main discussion you get, if you got to believe me, is with Dawn's mom and her, because Dawn's mom is a doctor. She's actually doing the brain scan, so she has more reason to actually be believed. So I actually appreciate that. And of course, you get your typical slice of life high school kid stuff. What's in young adult horror, because this is a young adult horror book. But it's not drawn on. It doesn't waste much of the plot. It actually adds some charm to the characters, some unique things. Some of it is plot convenience and plot devices, but nothing out of the ordinary that made me extremely shocked. The only drawback to the book is it can be a little bit repetitive, but it's 200 pages, so it is what it is. It's not too repetitive that much. But the climax of the story gets a little bit too crazy for me. I understand that it involves dream sequences and stuff like that, but it got a little bit confusing as to what was going on, and that stuff doesn't really get clarified until the end when there's like a big reveal. And the very ending scene is pretty intense. You know, you got some possession scenes, you got some crazy character decisions that have to be made. So that was all pretty good. And yeah, overall, I'd probably give this story a 7.4 out of 10, which is a pretty good. I had a fun time with it. I think it's a pretty good story. It's got good elements in there. It'll creep you out. If you like sci-fi horror, you'll like some of the monster and creature feature or otherworldly stuff that might be involved with this. And the characters are charming enough. Pretty one-dimensional, but they got enough likability to them. But yeah, I just felt like it was a little bit too tame at points. It got a little bit convoluted towards a certain part in the book. And although it got cleared up at the end, I feel like the ending, although it is good, is a little bit lackluster for the scale of this phenomenon going on in the town. And that's essentially where I'll leave it. So yeah, 7.4 out of 10, a pretty good book, and I would recommend you guys pick this up. Again, it's a relatively unknown horror paperback. If you go on Goodreads, it's got 54 ratings and 8 reviews, so it's not a complete unknown, but it is a relative unknown. And it's an Archway paperback, so this is something I'm going to be trying to do on my channel, doing more reviews for vintage horror books, especially vintage horror paperbacks that a lot of you guys may not know. I'm going to take a lot of my recommendations and reads from Paperback Mania. So go check out Paperback Mania's channel. Shout out to Leon. Even though he's not uploaded in like 3 years, go check out his videos. Go like his videos. Go support him still. Go subscribe. I gave him a shout out earlier back, but I think he's a great guy. He's got a great channel. He's a literature teacher, in fact, so he's got much more thorough and better reviews than I do. But either way, I think I'm going to be reading some of the books that he recommends, maybe checking out some other vintage horror paperbacks, and seeing what I can cover. So this is the first installment of many to come in the future. If you guys enjoyed, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit that like button. It's a free way to support me. Lets me know you guys are engaged with the content. Helps build up this community. I want to keep building up this channel, upward momentum, because it gets these reviews out there for all of you guys so you guys can find out about cool books, cool media involving horror, and you can come to your own conclusions and thoughts and give them a read. And yeah, stay tuned for more content to come. I got more cool stuff on the way, and that's all I got for today. Deuces. I swear to God, the fact that I announced that I do not get sleep paralysis or sleepwalking, Lord, do not hit me with that shit. I am not ready, bro. I am not ready because believe me, I can't fly for shit. And I'm not going anywhere near a window. Save me if you see me.